Alright, here are my thoughts on The Littlest Warrior. So, this is another Toei animation movie from Japan, of course. Let me see, it focuses on this family who, yeah, there's this, some royal douche who wants to marry the teenage daughter, and, and then he, has the father arrested, and the father gets he doesn't get executed, he dies in prison by the end of the movie. And then the royal douche sets their place on fire, and then they gotta, I don't know, they're traveling out. I think they're trying to get the father out of prison, but then they get captured by these slave owners, and the mother manages to escape, and then there's this servant girl who apparently is actually a mermaid. So yeah, the teenage daughter and her little brother are slaves, and yeah, then the daughter, the sister tells the brother to go look for the Mikado, and yeah, I think he's supposed to, I don't know, help them in some way. I mean, I guess the plot was straightforward enough, but the story itself was pretty unfocused. And yeah, a lot of the time, I didn't know. For instance, the royal douche at the beginning, who sets their house on fire, they trick him into falling into a river, but, he's still alive. But regardless, we don't see him again, and, you think he's gonna be the villain of the movie, but he's not. It's actually the slave owners. And yeah, this, obviously the idea of this movie was that it's supposed to be it's supposed to be kind of on the darker side than the previous movies we've watched from Toei. The other movies were kind of upbeat and entertaining. This one goes for some gritty realism, if you will. And sometimes it works. There's this pretty well done scene where the brother and sister are getting whipped, and it's showing it in slow motion. That's a pretty darkly emotional moment, and then they have this nightmare about the slave drivers, but otherwise I think it was a little unpleasant and kind of dull. I mean, yeah, I guess you can't expect a movie of this nature to be this big, entertaining romp fest. But I think even if you go for, even if you aim for darker territory, you should try to, make it at least somewhat enjoyable to watch. There should be at least some entertainment value. Even the darkest dramatic movies could use some entertainment, because that's kind of what helps keep the audience's interest. And there's not all that much emotional connection to the characters. Yeah, there's a couple emotional scenes in there, but despite the nature of the movie, it still has this mermaid. It still has these little animal sidekicks, just like the other Toei movies did. Ironically, the only one that didn't was Alakazam, and that one that one had human sidekicks, but yeah, once again, this movie's got like cute little animal sidekicks, and they just don't fit. And there's a little bear cub again. Like, every single one of these movies, they have to have like a bear cub, and they all look the same. I mean, the first one, it was a panda bear, but yeah, afterwards, like, they're all... Otherwise, they all look the same, yeah. So, what else? Also, the sister turns into a swan, apparently. She, like, falls in love with this guy, and then she gets, like, threatened by one of the slave owners, and, you know, the boyfriend character fights him off, but, you know, she just goes to this lake, she sees the reflections of her parents and her brother, and then she just turns into a swan out of nowhere, and then, you know, by the end, the son, who's, like, grown up now, he finds his mother, who's now blind. And I will admit, the scene where we see the blind mother is kind of sad. I did get a little teary-eyed with that part, but, yeah, they see the sister as a swan, and they just, yeah, they're like, oh, look, it's her, blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, it just seems, why? Like, why did she have to turn into a swan? Why, like, how does this fit into the story? Why the mermaid? I mean, sure, the mermaid, fights off these, other captors from earlier in the movie, but, she actually kills them. But, yeah, otherwise, what role does she have in the movie? The swan, like... Yeah, why did the sister have to turn into a swan? She could have stayed as a human, she could have gotten together with a boyfriend, and then soon enough she would have found her brother, and, yeah, found her mom and brother, and they all would have lived happily ever after, but no, she had to turn into a swan. Like, I mean, I guess it's kind of a metaphor for committing suicide, but, I don't... It just feels like she just didn't need to do that. There's no need to turn into a swan. What else? I mean, the animation was still pretty nice. The character designs were good. It was pretty. If nothing else, it was very pretty to look at. But, okay, the audio is where the real problem lies. I think this is mainly for the dub I watched. I watched an English dub of the movie, and first of all, the voice acting is some of the worst I have ever heard. Like, the voice actors just didn't give a crap. I think probably the only character who sounded the least bit decent was the Emperor, and I think this is mainly because he was I don't know who's voicing him, but I know I've heard his voice somewhere before. He's like some kind of voiceover, like some kind of famous voiceover from the 50s and 60s, and that's probably why he's the best sounding character in the movie. But yeah, otherwise the voice actors are just terrible. Probably the worst one is the chick who voices the mouse. She is, yeah, that character is really irritating. Yeah, it was a crappy dub of a movie that tries a little too hard, but at the same time doesn't try hard enough. I can see what they were going for, and I do think it worked in some parts, but, yeah, this wasn't a very enjoyable movie. I think this is Toei's first real dud for me. I almost said dub. Nope, they've had a couple dubs before this, but actually I think all of the ones I've watched so far have an American dub. The only one the only Toei movie I watched so far that wasn't the English dub, was Tale of the White Serpent. There is apparently an American dub of it, but I haven't found it anywhere. But yeah, I watched the Japanese version. But yeah, I just didn't care for this movie, even if I watched it in the original dub. And another problem is this dub does seem to cut out some parts. Like there's this part where the kid is talking to the Mikado, and like they cut out, or I don't think it's the Mikado. I think it was like a monk who works for the Mikado, and they like, yeah, there's some parts that are just cut out there, cut out. I guess it's like a mistake they made, and yeah, it's got some problems. So yeah, if you're curious, then you can feel free to check it out. I know there's some people who grew up with the movie. That's all well and good. If you like it, that's fine. But yeah, feel free to check it out if you're curious, or if you like feel you must see like every anime movie or every Toei movie. But otherwise, this is probably a skip. So, I guess it was at least better than Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors, at least from a technical standpoint. It doesn't have like the entertaining badness that movie had, but yeah. I guess a 5 out of 10 is appropriate enough. Some things worked in this movie, but yeah, for the most part, this movie had problems, and didn't really care for it. So yeah, as usual, if there's anything else I need to add, because surely there's some things to bring up, I'll talk about it in the comment section, and yeah. So that's about it. Mash it and smash it, signing off.